My name is Daniel Mercer, and for 42 years, I believed I had built a family strong enough to survive anything. I raised my son, Ethan, and my daughter, Claire, after their mother died from cancer. Ethan was 13. Claire was 9. I worked double shifts at the railway depot, cooked meals that were often burned, attended every school meeting, and never missed a birthday. When they became adults, I helped Ethan open a construction company and paid the deposit on Claire's first home. I never asked for repayment. I only wanted their love. At 76, after a fall damaged my hip, I spent 3 weeks in the hospital. Ethan and Claire visited every day, bringing flowers and speaking softly about my recovery. "You shouldn't live alone anymore, Dad," Claire said. Ethan nodded. "Just temporarily. Somewhere safe until you're stronger." They showed me papers. My eyes were blurry from medication, and my hands trembled. "What am I signing?" I asked. "Medical authorization," Ethan said. "It lets us handle your appointments." Claire squeezed my shoulder. "You trust us, don't you?" Those words silenced every doubt. I signed. 2 days later, I was taken to Meadowbrook Nursing Home. The building smelled of disinfectant and boiled vegetables. Ethan placed one suitcase beside my bed. "Where are my other things?" I asked. "We'll bring them later," he replied. Claire kissed my forehead without meeting my eyes. Through the window, I watched them walk toward Ethan's car. They were smiling. Not relieved smiles. Victorious smiles. For 3 weeks, they ignored my calls. Then I learned the truth. The papers had not been medical forms. I had signed over power of attorney and transferred ownership of my house, savings, and investments. Ethan had sold my home. Claire had emptied my accounts. Together, they had taken everything. When I confronted them by telephone, Ethan did not deny it. "You weren't using the money," he said. "We have families and responsibilities. That money was my life's work." "You're in a nursing home now," Claire replied coldly. "Everything you need is provided." I begged them to return at least my photographs, my wife's wedding ring, and the wooden train my father had carved for me. Claire sighed. "We already cleared the house." "What does that mean?" "It means most of it was thrown away." Something inside me broke. A month later, Ethan stopped paying Meadowbrook. The administrator entered my room with a security guard and told me I had 24 hours to leave. "I have nowhere to go," I whispered. "That is not our responsibility." The next morning, they placed me outside with my suitcase. Rain soaked my coat as cars passed without stopping. My children had stolen my home, abandoned me, and left me waiting to die on a sidewalk. Then a black car pulled over. A tall man stepped out, stared at me, and went pale. "Mr. Mercer," he said. I did not recognize him, but he knelt in the rain and took my freezing hands. "My name is Samuel Reed," he said. "I have been searching for you for 27 years. Samuel helped me into his car and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. He appeared to be in his early 40s, with tired eyes and a scar running along his jaw. His expensive suit suggested wealth, but the way he spoke carried the humility of someone who remembered hardship. "Why were you searching for me?" I asked. Samuel looked at me through the rearview mirror. "Because you saved my life." I had no idea what he meant. He drove me to a private clinic where doctors treated my dehydration and early pneumonia. Samuel refused to leave until I was stable. That evening, he returned carrying an old metal lunchbox. I recognized it immediately. I had owned one like it during my railway years. Samuel opened it and removed a faded photograph. It showed me at 49, wearing my orange railway vest beside a frightened teenage boy. The memory returned. 27 years earlier, I had found a 15-year-old runaway sleeping inside an abandoned freight car. He was starving, bruised, and terrified of being returned to his violent stepfather. I bought him food, contacted a shelter, and spent months helping him enroll in school. Before he left for a foster home, I gave him money I had been saving for a fishing boat. "You were that boy," I whispered. Samuel nodded. "You told me one decent person could change the direction of a life." I remembered him as Sam, a thin teenager who rarely spoke. "I became an engineer," he continued. "Then I started a logistics company. I searched for you after my first success, but you had moved. Your old employer had incomplete records." "Why now?" Samuel's expression darkened. Last week, my company purchased a property development portfolio. Your home was included. My heart stopped. He placed documents on the table. The papers showed that Ethan had sold my house to a developer associated with Samuel's company. The transaction had raised questions because the property transfer occurred days after I entered Meadowbrook. Samuel's legal team investigated. They discovered that my signature had been obtained while I was heavily medicated. The hospital records showed that I lacked legal capacity on the day I signed. There's more, Samuel said. My children had not merely taken my property. Ethan had forged additional documents to access a private investment account. Claire had posed as me during a recorded banking call. Together, they had stolen nearly $2 million. I stared at the figures. I had lived modestly and invested carefully for decades. Ethan and Claire knew I had savings, but even they had not realized how much. They spent most of it, Samuel said. Luxury cars, vacations, business debts, and a house for Claire. I looked away, ashamed. Samuel touched my shoulder. The shame belongs to them. He offered me a room in his home, but I refused. I will not become someone else's burden. Samuel smiled sadly. You never considered me a burden. The next morning, he brought a lawyer named Maria Chen. She explained that we could challenge the transfers, recover remaining assets, and pursue criminal charges. I hesitated. They were still my children. Then Maria played a recording discovered during the investigation. Claire's voice filled the room. He won't last 6 months in that place. Ethan laughed. By the time anyone notices, everything will be gone. I felt the last thread connecting me to them snap. File everything, I said. Samuel exchanged a glance with Maria. There's one more truth you need to know, he said. He opened another folder. Inside was a birth certificate, and beneath the name of Samuel's deceased mother was a line identifying his biological father. The name printed there was mine. I read the birth certificate 3 times. Father, Daniel Mercer. That is impossible, I said. Samuel sat across from me, his face tense. My mother's name was Rebecca Reed. The name reached into a buried part of my past. Rebecca had worked at a cafe near the railway depot when I was 24. We dated for less than a year. I loved her, but she disappeared after her father became ill. She sent one letter saying she had moved west and did not want me to follow. I never heard from her again. She was pregnant? I whispered. Samuel nodded. She never told you. After Rebecca died, Samuel found journals among her belongings. In them, she confessed that her father had threatened to disown her if she married a poor railway worker. She left without telling me about the baby. Samuel had spent years searching for his father without knowing whether I was alive. You found me in the freight yard by accident, he said. Neither of us knew. The coincidence left us speechless. At 15, my own son had been placed in my path, and I had helped him as a stranger. Samuel's eyes filled with tears. You saved me twice, once by giving me life, and once by giving me hope. I reached across the table and held his hand. For the first time since my wife's death, I cried without hiding it. A DNA test later confirmed the truth. Samuel was my son. During the following weeks, he brought me to his home. It was large but warm, filled with books, family photographs, and the sound of children. His wife, Elena, welcomed me without hesitation. Their daughters, Mia and Sophie, called me Grandpa Daniel before the first day ended. I had lost 2 children and discovered another. Yet the legal battle had only begun. Ethan and Claire received notice that the transfers were being challenged. They arrived at Samuel's office furious. I watched the meeting through a video link from another room. Ethan slammed his fist on the table. Our father gave us everything voluntarily. Maria placed the hospital report before him. He was sedated and mentally impaired. Claire crossed her arms. He signed the papers. You impersonated him during a bank call, Maria replied. Claire's face lost its color. Then Samuel entered. Ethan sneered. Who are you? Daniel Mercer's son. Silence filled the room. Claire laughed nervously. Our father has only 2 children. Samuel placed the DNA report on the table. Now he has 1. Ethan stood abruptly. This is some kind of scam. No, Samuel said. The scam was stealing from an injured old man. He explained that the property sale had been frozen and that court orders were being prepared to seize their assets. Claire began to cry, not from regret, from fear. "What does Dad want?" she asked. Samuel looked directly at the camera, knowing I was watching. "He wanted his family. You decided he was worth less than his money." The meeting ended with threats from Ethan and desperate pleas from Claire. That evening, I sat on Samuel's balcony watching the sunset. "Do you hate them?" he asked. I considered the question. No, but I finally understand that loving someone does not require allowing them to destroy you. The following morning, Maria called. Ethan had disappeared. So had the last remaining money. And security footage showed him entering Claire's house the night before carrying a gun. Police surrounded Claire's house before sunrise. Samuel wanted me to remain home, but I insisted on going. We waited inside a patrol car while officers entered the property. They found Claire alone in the kitchen, terrified but unharmed. Ethan was gone. He had demanded access to money Claire had hidden from him. When she refused, he threatened her and searched the house. Claire finally admitted that she had concealed $300,000 in an overseas account. Even thieves did not trust each other. The police issued a warrant for Ethan's arrest. His wife, Laura, contacted Maria and revealed that Ethan had been lying for years. His construction company was drowning in debt, and he had used my savings to cover failed projects. He had told Laura that I willingly gave him the money. When she learned the truth, she filed for divorce. Claire's husband left as well, taking their son with him. Within days, the lives they had built with stolen money began collapsing. Luxury vehicles were seized. Bank accounts were frozen. Claire's new house was placed under court control. She called me repeatedly. At first, I refused to answer. Then one evening, I accepted. "Dad," she whispered, "I made a terrible mistake." "A mistake is forgetting a birthday," I replied. "You abandoned me in the rain." She sobbed. "Ethan pressured me. You smiled when you left." Silence. "I was scared," she said. "No. You believed I was powerless." She asked me to tell the prosecutor that I did not want charges filed. "Will you do it?" she pleaded. I remembered teaching her to ride a bicycle. I remembered carrying her into the emergency room after she broke her arm. I remembered how she used to fall asleep on my chest. Part of me wanted to save that little girl. But the woman on the telephone had left her father to die. "I will tell the truth," I said. "Nothing more." 2 days later, Ethan was caught at the airport using a false passport. He had purchased a ticket to Argentina and carried $70,000 in cash. At the preliminary hearing, he avoided looking at me. Claire pleaded guilty to fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. Ethan refused a deal and blamed everyone else. The prosecutors played the nursing home security footage in court. It showed employees placing me outside while rain poured down. Then they played the recording of Ethan laughing about my death. Even his attorney lowered his eyes. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us. Samuel shielded me from their questions, but I stopped. I faced the cameras. My children believed age had made me invisible. I said, "There are thousands of parents suffering the same betrayal. Listen to them before it is too late." The story spread across the country. Letters arrived from elderly people who had been exploited by relatives. Some had lost homes. Others had lost pensions, businesses, or dignity. Samuel and I began discussing a foundation to provide legal help and emergency housing to abandoned seniors. For the first time, my pain seemed capable of becoming something useful. Then Maria called with news about the estate recovery. Most of my assets could be restored, but among the documents taken from Ethan's office, investigators found a sealed letter written by my late wife. It was addressed to me. The date on the envelope was 6 months before her death. And across the front she had written, "Daniel, this contains the truth about Ethan. Part 5, My Wife's Secret." The envelope rested quietly on the table, yet it felt heavier than anything I had ever lifted. My late wife's handwriting covered the front in graceful blue ink. "Daniel, this contains the truth about Ethan." For several minutes, I simply stared at those words. Margaret had been gone for 21 years. During all those years, I had believed there were no more secrets between us. We had shared struggles, celebrated victories, buried dreams, and raised 2 children together. Even after her passing, I often found myself talking to her photograph before going to bed. Now, one final conversation waited inside a sealed envelope. With trembling hands, I unfolded the letter. Her words began with an apology. She wrote that she had loved me every day of our marriage, but fear had prevented her from telling me the truth. Before we met, she had briefly been involved with another man. When she discovered she was pregnant, the man abandoned her without hesitation. Then she met me. I fell in love with her almost immediately. She had planned to tell me about the pregnancy before accepting my proposal, but every time she tried, I spoke excitedly about becoming a father. She feared losing the only man who had ever truly loved her. So she remained silent. When Ethan was born, I held him in my arms and believed he was my son. Margaret wrote that every birthday, every family photograph, and every Father's Day filled her with both happiness and guilt. She wanted to confess countless times, especially during her illness, but she couldn't bear the thought of destroying the family we had built. By the time I reached the end of the first page, tears blurred the words. Not because I felt betrayed, because I understood her fear. Nothing in that letter erased the memories of teaching Ethan to ride a bicycle, helping him with homework, or sitting beside his hospital bed when pneumonia nearly took him as a child. I had changed his diapers. I had comforted his nightmares. I had celebrated his graduation. Blood could never erase those moments. Samuel sat quietly across the room, allowing me to finish in silence. The second half of Margaret's letter revealed an even greater surprise. Months before her death, Ethan's biological father had contacted her through a lawyer. He was terminally ill and wanted to acknowledge his son. Margaret refused to let him disrupt Ethan's life, but the man insisted on creating a trust fund. $5 million. Margaret instructed her attorney to keep the trust sealed until Ethan reached 45 years old. She hoped maturity would help him use the inheritance wisely. Instead, the truth became almost unbearable. Maria Chin later confirmed that Ethan had received the inheritance only 3 months before convincing me to sign away my estate. The courtroom suddenly looked very different in my mind. For weeks, I had wondered whether desperation had driven my son to steal from me. Now I knew it hadn't. He had already possessed more wealth than I had accumulated in an entire lifetime. His betrayal had been fueled not by need, but by greed. When investigators confronted him with the financial records, the illusion collapsed. Bank statements showed reckless investments, luxury purchases, speculative business ventures, and extravagant vacations. Within weeks of receiving millions, Ethan had already lost a significant portion through risky schemes. Instead of accepting responsibility, he looked toward my savings as another source of rescue. I remembered every overtime shift I had worked, every birthday gift I postponed buying for myself, every holiday I skipped because extra pay meant a brighter future for my children. Those sacrifices had never been investments expecting repayment. They had been acts of love. Somewhere along the way, Ethan had mistaken love for weakness. The sentencing hearing arrived on a gray autumn morning. The courtroom remained silent as the prosecutor replayed the recording in which Ethan laughed about my future. He won't last 6 months. Hearing those words again hurt no less than the first time. Claire sat nearby, crying quietly. Unlike Ethan, she had accepted responsibility. She admitted forging banking records. She admitted helping transfer my assets. Most importantly, she admitted abandoning me because she believed I would never recover. The judge spoke firmly. Elder abuse is among the cruelest forms of betrayal because it weaponizes trust. Claire received a reduced sentence after returning hidden assets and cooperating with investigators. Ethan received a far harsher punishment. Before officers led Claire away, she asked if she could speak with me privately. We met through a glass partition. "Dad," she whispered, unable to stop crying, "I don't deserve another chance." I nodded. "No, I've spent every night remembering the day we left you. I remember it too. I wish I could erase it." "So do I." She pressed her hand against the glass. "I loved you. I believed that once you did." Her shoulders shook. "What happens now? You spend the rest of your life becoming someone different from the woman who abandoned her father." She closed her eyes. "I'll try. I hope you do. As I walked away, I realized something surprising. My anger no longer controlled me. It remained painful, but it no longer owned me. Several weeks later, Samuel handed me the restored deed to my old home. I bought it back, he said quietly. You shouldn't have. I wanted you to choose what happens next. We visited together. The house looked almost identical. The porch still creaked. The maple tree still shaded the front yard. Yet something had changed. It no longer felt like home. The memories remained beautiful, but they belonged to another chapter of my life. Instead of moving back, I made a decision that surprised everyone. We'll donate it. Samuel smiled. For the foundation? I nodded. If my children turn this house into a symbol of betrayal, let's turn it into a place where abandoned parents find hope instead. Within months, volunteers transformed the property into the first shelter for elderly victims of financial exploitation. We named it Margaret House. As workers installed the new sign outside, I looked toward the front door and whispered, "You were right, Margaret. Love is measured by what we build, not by what we lose." Little did I know that one final meeting still awaited me. A prison letter from Ethan had arrived, and he wanted to see me. The letter from Ethan remained unopened on my desk for nearly 3 weeks. Every morning, I looked at it while drinking coffee. Every evening, I looked at it again before turning off the light. I knew what it contained, or at least I thought I did. Apologies, excuses, regret. None of those things could change what had happened. One afternoon, Samuel walked into my study and noticed the envelope. "You don't have to read it," he said gently. "I know. You don't owe anyone another chance." I looked at the faded handwriting on the front. "I'm not reading it for him," I replied. "I'm reading it for myself." That evening, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dad, if you're reading this, thank you for giving me more than I deserve. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect another relationship. I only want one opportunity to tell you the truth while looking you in the eye. If you decide never to see me again after that, I'll understand." The letter continued for several pages. Ethan admitted that greed had become a habit long before he stole from me. Every business success only made him want more. Every expensive purchase lost its excitement within days. When he received the $5 million inheritance from his biological father, he believed his life would finally feel complete. Instead, it only increased his appetite. He made reckless investments, borrowed against the inheritance, and convinced himself that one more deal would recover every loss. When those investments failed, panic replaced pride. He saw my savings, not as the result of a lifetime of sacrifice, but as money that would solve his problems. The final sentence stopped me cold. "The day I left you at the nursing home was the day I stopped being your son, even if I didn't admit it until prison forced me to face myself." I folded the letter carefully. "I'll visit him," I told Samuel. Samuel nodded without judgment. "Whatever happens, you'll finally have your answer." The prison visiting room was quiet. A correctional officer escorted Ethan inside. For a moment, I barely recognized him. His shoulders were lower than I remembered. The confidence that had once filled every room had disappeared. Gray streaks had spread through his hair, and deep lines marked his face. Prison had not only aged him, it had stripped away every illusion. He sat across from me without speaking. Finally, he whispered, "Thank you for coming. I came to listen." He lowered his eyes. "I spent months blaming everyone else." He took a deep breath. "The lawyers, Claire, the banks, my business partners, even you." I remained silent, but eventually there was nobody left to blame. He looked directly at me. It was me. For the first time since this nightmare began, there was no anger in his voice, only honesty. "I kept telling myself you were safe," he continued. "I convinced myself the nursing home would take care of you. You knew they wouldn't." "I did. You laughed about my death." His eyes filled with tears. "I hear that recording every night." Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, he asked quietly, "Do you know what prison has taught me?" "What?" "That money isn't what people lose first." I waited. "They lose themselves." He explained how every stolen dollar had required another lie, another excuse, another betrayal. By the time he stole from me, He had already become someone he no longer recognized. I wish I had realized it sooner. So do I. He hesitated. Are you angry that I'm not your biological son? The question surprised me. No, you aren't. I loved you before I knew the truth. He stared at me. I taught you to throw a baseball. I stayed awake beside your hospital bed. I celebrated every birthday. Biology didn't make me your father. Tears rolled down his face. My choices destroyed that relationship. Yes, I'm sorry. I believe you. Hope briefly appeared in his eyes. But believing you're sorry, I continued, isn't the same as pretending none of this happened. His shoulders slumped again. I understand. I may forgive you one day. He looked up. But forgiveness is something I do for my own peace, not because you've earned another place in my life. He nodded slowly. I don't deserve one. No. He took one final breath. Will you still think of me sometimes? I smiled sadly. I'll always remember the little boy who ran into my arms after his first baseball game. And that man has to decide who he becomes from here. The correctional officer announced that visiting time was over. I stood. So, this is goodbye? Ethan asked. I looked at him for a long moment. This is the end of one chapter. He nodded. I hope you write a better one. Without another word, I walked away. As I stepped outside, the cool autumn air filled my lungs. Samuel was waiting beside the car. He studied my expression before asking, How do you feel? I thought carefully. Lighter. You forgave him? I released my hatred. That's different. It is. On the drive home, neither of us spoke. For the first time in years, silence felt peaceful instead of lonely. The following months were filled with new beginnings. Margaret House welcomed its first residents. Some had been abandoned by relatives. Others had lost everything to financial abuse. Many arrived carrying nothing more than a suitcase and broken trust. Every person who entered reminded me of the frightened old man sitting alone in the rain outside the nursing home. I greeted each resident personally. You are safe here, I always said. And you matter. Those 4 words often made people cry. Samuel expanded the foundation using recovered assets from my estate. Lawyers volunteered their time. Doctors offered free health screenings. Financial advisors helped seniors protect what remained of their savings. Soon, similar homes opened in neighboring communities. What had begun with my suffering became hope for hundreds of families. Claire completed her prison sentence several years later. She wrote regularly during her incarceration. At first, every letter begged for forgiveness. Eventually, the letters changed. She stopped asking for another chance. Instead, she described volunteering in prison literacy programs, counseling younger inmates, and studying social work. She accepted responsibility without demanding anything in return. One spring afternoon, she asked if she could attend the annual Margaret House fundraiser. I agreed, but only as a guest. When she arrived, she looked older, quieter, and humbler. She spent most of the evening serving meals to residents instead of speaking about herself. Before leaving, she approached me. I don't expect to be your daughter again, she said softly. I know, but thank you for letting me help. I nodded. Keep helping people. She smiled through tears. I will. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was the first honest conversation we'd shared in years. On my 80th birthday, the garden behind Margaret House overflowed with laughter. Residents, volunteers, lawyers, nurses, neighbors, and children gathered beneath strings of warm lights. Samuel's daughters, Mia and Sophie, raced across the lawn carrying a birthday cake they had helped decorate. They hugged me tightly. Happy birthday, Grandpa. Hearing those words filled a place in my heart that I once believed would remain empty forever. After dinner, Samuel invited everyone to the front entrance. A bronze plaque stood beside the walkway, covered by a blue cloth. Together, we pulled the cloth away. The inscription read, "In honor of Daniel Mercer, a father who proved that dignity cannot be stolen. Kindness is never wasted, and love has the power to rebuild lives long after betrayal. May every person who enters this home remember that growing old never makes anyone worthless." The crowd applauded. I struggled to hold back tears. Looking around, I saw faces filled with gratitude instead of greed. Families reunited. Volunteers embracing residents. Children laughing with grandparents who had once believed they would die alone. Then I understood something important. Ethan and Claire had taken my house. They had emptied my bank accounts. They had tried to steal my future. But they had failed to take the one thing that mattered most: my ability to love. As the sun began to set, Samuel placed an arm around my shoulder. "You once told a frightened teenage boy that one act of kindness could change a life," he said. "It changed mine too," I replied. "No," he answered with a smile. "It changed all of ours." I looked toward the front doors of Margaret House, where another elderly couple was being welcomed inside with warm smiles. Years earlier, I had stood alone in the rain, believing my life was over. Now I stood surrounded by people who had become my family. Not because they shared my blood, but because they shared my heart. My children believed they had thrown away a helpless old man. Instead, they uncovered a strength they never understood. Their greed cost them their freedom, their reputation, and the love they once took for granted. My greatest loss became my greatest purpose. And in the end, the greatest regret was never mine. It belonged to the children who discovered too late that the father they abandoned had been the richest man in the world. Not because of what he owned, but because of the love he never stopped giving.